All right, so today we're diving deep on something a little different, something everyone thinks they know all about, the environment.
Yes.
But not the,
Right.
the basics, like remembering to recycle your cans.
Yeah, yeah.
We're really going to dig into some of the sources that you sent over.
Okay.
That really get down into how environmental issues are way more close to home than we think.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that because I think a lot of times those headlines about, glaciers melting or endangered species, they can feel like a world away. They feel very distant. But the reality is a healthy environment isn't just about, saving all the cute animals out there.
Right.
It's about our homes and the stability of our communities.
Oh, okay. So not just about polar bears on,
Exactly.
shrinking ice flows.
Yeah.
It's stuff that affects me.
It really does. It affects all of us.
Okay. I'm listening.
So think about it, like the increase in intense hurricanes,
the
the mega wildfires that are wiping out entire towns. Those are very real, tangible things that are directly linked to climate change.
Yeah.
And they're happening now, not in some, far off future.
Yeah, that's scary.
And then you think about habitat loss.
Okay.
Which again, it can be sad when you think about it just from the perspective of the animals.
Right.
But it disrupts entire ecosystems.
So fewer birds chirping in the trees actually does have some consequences.
Way bigger than you might imagine.
Okay.
So for example, you think about bees.
Okay.
As they lose habitat due to deforestation or, pesticide use, their populations plummet.
That makes sense.
And so you have less pollination, which means lower crop yields, which ultimately leads to higher food prices and even potential food shortages.
Wow. So that salad I had for lunch is a lot more complicated than I thought.
Exactly. Everything is connected.
Wow.
So when we talk about protecting the environment, we're really talking about protecting this intricate web of life that sustains us.
Okay. I'm getting the bigger picture.
But honestly, it sometimes feels like these problems are just so huge.
Yeah.
Like, what can I, as one person, even do about it?
Yeah. I think that's a really common feeling.
Right.
And it's important to remember that individual actions, when multiplied across millions of people, can have a real impact.
Okay.
So it's not about being perfect.
Right.
It's about making, conscious choices whenever possible.
So that whole reduce, reuse, recycle thing actually matters.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Recycling, for instance, reduces the need to extract virgin materials, which often involves destructive mining practices and deforestation.
Right.
It also conserves energy and reduces greenhouse gas emissions.
So it's not just about, throwing something in the blue bin and hoping for the best.
Exactly. It's a much bigger picture.
Okay.
But even beyond recycling,
Yeah.
there are so many simple changes
Okay, like what?
that we can make in our daily lives.
Give me some examples.
Well, let's start with energy conservation.
Okay.
Something as simple as switching to LED light bulbs can make a difference.
Okay. LEDs use significantly less energy than traditional incandescent bulbs, and they last much longer.
So I can save money on my electricity bill and help the environment.
Exactly. Win-win.
I like that.
And speaking of energy, what about transportation?
Oh, okay.
Choosing to walk, bike, or take public transportation instead of driving alone in a car,
Right.
whenever possible, can significantly reduce your carbon footprint.
That makes sense. I do enjoy a good bike ride.
Me too.
But what about those times when you just can't avoid driving?
Well, even then, there are things you can do.
Okay.
Make sure your tires are properly inflated, avoid aggressive driving, and combine errands to reduce the number of trips you take.
Those are good tips.
Yeah, just little things can make a difference.
Okay. But I feel like we're starting to get into some serious eco jargon.
Yeah, we are.
Maybe we should take a moment to define some of these terms.
I agree.
Just so everyone's on the same page.
Clear communication is key when it comes to understanding these complex issues. So let's start with sustainable.
Okay. Sustainable.
I feel like that gets thrown around a lot.
Yeah, I hear it all the time, but I'm not always sure I fully understand it.
So sustainable essentially means using resources in a way that meets our current needs without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs.
Okay.
It's about living in balance with the planet's limits.
So it's about thinking long term and making sure we're not just using everything up for ourselves.
Exactly.
Okay.
And a key part of that is understanding our carbon footprint.
Carbon footprint.
Which is basically a measure of the impact our activities have on the environment in terms of greenhouse gas emissions.
So the more I drive, the bigger my carbon footprint.
You got it.
Carbon
And the
footprint.
same goes for flying, consuming energy, even the food we eat.
Wow. Okay.
But the good news is there are many ways to reduce our individual carbon footprints.
Okay.
Like those transportation choices.
Right.
And energy saving tips we were just talking about.
Okay. Carbon footprint. Got it. What about conservation?
Conservation.
I feel like that's another one that people use a lot,
Yeah.
but might not totally grasp.
Conservation focuses on protecting and managing natural resources wisely. It's about recognizing the finite nature of resources like water, forests, and minerals, and using them responsibly to ensure their availability for future generations.
So like being mindful of how much water I use or making sure to recycle paper products to conserve trees.
Exactly. It's about making choices that help preserve the natural world
Right.
for both ourselves and future generations.
Okay. I feel like we've covered a lot of ground here,
We have.
but it's all starting to make sense.
Correct.
It's not just about, grand gestures. It's about those everyday choices we make and how they add up to something much bigger.
Exactly. It's about the collective impact of our individual choices.
Yeah.
It's interesting how our sources kind of frame this whole sustainability thing. It's not just about individual actions. It's about changing the systems around us, too.
Okay, so what does that look like? Are we talking like government policies, big corporations changing their ways?
Both, actually.
Right.
One source really dives into how governments can actually incentivize renewable energy, like solar and wind power,
Right.
by offering tax breaks to companies that invest in them.
Okay, that makes sense.
And then on the flip side, they can also put stricter regulations on polluting industries.
Right, but some of those big companies, it doesn't seem like they're too eager to change unless it benefits their bottom line.
True, and that's where consumer power comes in.
Okay.
When we as consumers choose to support businesses that prioritize sustainability, it sends a strong message.
Okay.
And this source actually highlights some really cool examples of companies that are using recycled materials in innovative ways.
Oh, wow.
Or going carbon neutral in their operations.
So voting with our wallets.
Exactly.
I can get behind that. But let's be real, not everyone can afford to, buy all organic, eco-friendly everything.
Well, totally. And this deep dive is not about guilt-tripping anyone. It's about awareness.
Right.
Maybe you can't afford to, go out and buy a Tesla.
Right.
But can you support your local farmer's market?
Right.
Little choices add up.
Okay, that makes sense. Speaking of choices,
Right.
our sources also talk about the power of community action.
Yes.
So what can we do beyond our own homes?
One that comes to mind is community gardens.
Oh, yeah, community gardens.
They not only provide fresh produce, but they build connections.
Right.
Reduce food miles, and they often use sustainable practices.
That's great.
And then there's advocacy work.
Okay.
Joining local environmental groups,
Right.
organizing cleanups, putting pressure on officials
Yeah.
to make eco-conscious decisions.
I've seen those groups pop up all over, but does it really make a difference, a bunch of people with signs?
It can.
Okay.
This source actually details how grassroots movements have pushed for stricter environmental regulations. They've stopped harmful projects and they've raised awareness that has led to real change.
So it's about, raising your voice and finding like-minded people, showing that you care.
Exactly. And it's about showing up,
Right.
making your voice heard.
So even if I'm not like a scientist or a politician, I can still be a part of the solution.
Absolutely. In fact, this deep dive really emphasizes that the environmental movement needs diverse voices. Artists, writers, educators,
Right.
everyone has a role to play
I like that.
in spreading awareness and inspiring change.
Okay, I'm feeling inspired. But one thing that kind of bugs me is how often environmentalism is presented as all doom and gloom.
Yeah.
Is there any room for, some joy in this?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
One source actually beautifully describes the concept of nature deficit disorder.
What is it?
This idea that we as modern humans are losing touch with the natural world
Okay.
and how it's affecting our well-being.
Interesting.
So spending time in nature, even just a walk in the park, can reduce stress, boost creativity, and make us feel more connected to the world around us.
I know. I always feel better after a hike.
Me too.
It's like hitting the reset button.
Exactly.
Right.
And the source even argues that experiencing awe and wonder in nature can inspire us to protect it.
Okay.
So when we connect with the beauty of the planet,
Right.
we're more likely to want to fight for its preservation.
So it's not just about duty or guilt. It's about rekindling that sense of awe and love for the natural world.
Exactly. And, these sources also touch on something really interesting.
Okay.
The role of indigenous knowledge
Oh,
in conservation efforts.
interesting.
Many indigenous cultures have lived sustainably for centuries.
Right.
And their practices offer valuable insights into how we can live in harmony with nature.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
So learning from those who have been stewards of the land for generations.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that traditional ecological knowledge has a lot to offer in terms of understanding and protecting the environment. One source even mentions how some indigenous communities are leading the charge in protecting their ancestral lands from deforestation and pollution,
Wow.
drawing on their deep connection to the land and their understanding of its delicate balance.
So it's not just about new technologies or policies. It's about learning from the past and incorporating those lessons into our approach to conservation.
Right. It's about recognizing that there are many ways of knowing and understanding the environment.
Right.
And that we can learn from each other to create a more sustainable future.
I love that. It feels like this deep dive has opened up a whole new way of thinking about environmentalism.
Good.
It's not just about what we shouldn't do. It's about what we can do about connecting with nature and about recognizing that we're all in this together.
Exactly.
So we've talked about a lot, individual actions and then, these systemic changes, the power of community, even the joy of connecting with nature.
Yeah, a really broad overview.
As we wrap up this deep dive, I'm curious, what are some of the key takeaways that you're seeing from these sources?
Well, one thing that really stood out to me is the importance of staying informed and engaged.
Okay.
The more we understand about the complexities of these environmental issues, the better equipped we are to actually, make informed decisions and advocate for change.
So it's not about being an expert in everything, but about staying curious and continuing to learn.
Exactly. And these sources actually offer some really great resources for doing just that.
Okay.
Documentaries that expose the realities of plastic pollution, websites that can help you track your carbon footprint, podcasts like this one that delve into, the latest scientific findings.
Right.
There's a wealth of information out there just waiting to be explored.
And the more we learn, the less overwhelming it all feels, right?
Right. Knowledge is power, as they say.
Exactly. And it's not just about absorbing information passively, right?
Right.
It's about engaging in critical thinking, questioning assumptions, and, being willing to have those sometimes uncomfortable conversations with friends, family, even colleagues.
It's true because not everyone's on the same page. Right.
When it comes to these issues.
Yeah.
But that's where respectful dialogue comes in.
Okay.
And one source even suggests framing these conversations around shared values. So, maybe you and your neighbor disagree about climate change.
Right.
But you both care about clean air and water for your kids.
Right.
So find that common ground and build from there.
That's such a good point. It's about finding those points of connection and working together to, create solutions that benefit everyone.
Exactly. And, change, it doesn't happen overnight.
Right.
It's a process. And there will be setbacks along the way.
Yeah, of course.
But these sources remind us that progress is being made.
Okay.
Renewable energy is on the rise. Innovative recycling technologies are emerging.
Right.
And people around the world are mobilizing to demand action.
That does give me hope. It's easy to get discouraged by all this, but it's important to remember that, there are reasons to be optimistic.
Absolutely. And I think one of the biggest reasons for optimism is the power of collective action. When people come together, whether it's through community initiatives, grassroots movements, global campaigns, they can create a force for change that is impossible to ignore.
So finding your tribe, raising your voice, and joining the movement.
Exactly. And never underestimating the power of even the smallest actions.
Right.
Because when millions of people choose to reduce their impact, make conscious choices, and advocate for a better future, it creates a ripple effect that can transform the world.
Well said. I think that's a perfect note to end on. This deep dive has been incredibly insightful and inspiring.
It has. It's been a pleasure diving deep with you.
And to our listeners, thank you for joining us on this journey of exploration and discovery. We hope you've gained some valuable insights, maybe even a few aha moments, and most importantly, a renewed sense of hope and possibility. Remember, we all have a role to play in creating a more sustainable and equitable future. Keep learning, keep engaging, and keep taking action.